Well, thank you all for joining us to the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority's October 2016 meeting. I'm going to do the roll call. Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Marie Klopp.
Here.
Howard Lazarus.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein.
Here.
Gary McKinnon.
Here.
Al McWilliams.
I'm here.
John Moat.
Here.
Rishi Narayan. Keith Orr.
Here.
John Split. Phil Weiss. We have a quorum.
All right. Audience participation. We have Ray Detter signed up. 4 minutes. And I think I can do this.
Well, let's grab that.
I won't start here.
Group of 8 downtown and near downtown. Something wrong?
No, I was just.
A group of 8 downtown and near downtown neighbors gathered together at my house last night for a discussion of Ann Arbor transportation topics. That is the Southeast Michigan Rapid Transit Plan, the connector, and the expected location of a future railroad station in Ann Arbor. And like a lot of other people in town, we recognize that we need to know more about these important possibilities. They've been discussed for a long period of time, but now we're getting into really deep into them in terms of the nature of their possibilities getting very much closer. And everyone last night got a copy of Future of Transit, which Susan supplied me with, and its outline of the improved transit services offered by the Regional Transit Plan for Macomb, Oakland, Wayne, and Washington counties. And all of us will be voting in favor of it in November. We recognize that the city of Ann Arbor and Southeast Michigan cannot expect to compete economically with other major metropolitan areas without a modern, reliable public transit system. And we strongly support the DDA resolution to support regional transit along with the Ann Arbor City Council and also the Ann Arbor Chamber of Commerce. And as Swiss Ward Councilman Chip Smith stated, everybody who drives a car benefits because for every person who gets on a bus or a train, instead of driving, there is one fewer car on the road. Several of us have been a part of the connector discussion over the course of many months. It's been going on for a long time. And we all carefully examined the most recent map of its proposed route options in relationship to the campus to downtown, possible north-south, Wally's connection, and the future location of a new east-west railroad station. In the last couple of weeks, I have personally attended 3 meetings of the environmental studies which are currently going on to determine the best possible station location. And I was surprised that the large majority of people attending those meetings seemed to favor one of the 3 Depot Street possibilities rather than the Fuller Road choice. To my surprise, that was also the general direction of our group last night. None of us, however, supported using the Gandy Dancer site, which we feel is a designated historic district or historic Department of Interior site. Probably its integrity would be harmed if it were combined into what was required in a modern railroad station. It was added only recently, but nobody supported that particular direction. But the 2 other locations near the existing depot were acceptable in cooperation with DTE, depending on federal environmental approval and no problems with floodway issues, which is very significant, and traffic studies. We were all intrigued with the combination approach with Amtrak passenger rail service at Depot and a commuter rail stop at a platform on Fuller and also a Depot Street station, which we're now told is a possible alternative combination of those 2. But that's only for the commuter. We were all in agreement at the end of our meeting that every one of us should continue to be very involved in this transit process. It's so extremely important, we feel, for the future development and success of downtown Ann Arbor. Thank you.
That's right. Any other audience participation? Seeing none. Reports from city boards and commissions. Seeing none. DDA member communication. Seeing none. Executive director communication. I see one.
Yeah, there we go. So I've got a few things to report. I'll begin by saying that last week I was invited to participate in a best practices parking panel in Boulder. In addition to the management team in Boulder, also there was the head of parking for Seattle and Aspen, the former Cedar Rapids parking director, and we also had their version of the Get Downtown coordinator for all of Denver. A couple things to report on that. The first is every one of us were talking about our parking systems in the same way. We all talked about parking as a tool to help us toward our goals of vitality and quality of life. We all talk about parking as part of the transportation system. We're all talking about providing the maximum amount of access by being multimodal and supporting all modes of transportation. We all have heard that the availability of parking is often the part of our job that gives us the most headaches. More than rates, more than all sorts of things, it's the availability. If I come downtown and I can't find a spot, that's a problem. We've also, all of us, been pushing at modifying parking rates to help people have more options. Because it encourages people to go to different parking spots, which may be a little less expensive, but maybe less convenient, but less expensive as well. All of us are struggling to figure out the technology solutions because there's this burgeoning world of technology and it's just starting to hit parking. And we talked about that this summer, hiring a technologist to help guide us in our work, because all of these burgeoning technologies are becoming available, but how do they straddle what you have today? How do you straddle off-street and on-street? How do you use this technology to help us in things like establishing parking rates, but also letting our customers know what parking is available? For instance, on-street, how do they know what meters are available to them? All of us are asking the question, I know John will like this, for instance, autonomous vehicles. What does it mean to the parking system? An example of that question is, it sounds really exciting that there'll be cars out there that'll pick us up and take us where we need to go, but if we're all coming to work at the same time, there's a peak for them as well. Do we have the road capacity for all these autonomous vehicles? And as interestingly, where do they go once you're not at peak? Where do they go when they're not hauling cars or hauling people around? We're all of us struggling with affordability, which means increasingly into the future, more of our workforce will be commuting into our downtown. How do we address their need to get to work? Particularly because a lot of these workers who can't afford to live in our community are also maybe not earning the top amount of money, which means we need to figure out even better strategies to use transit. That's not only because of that element of affordability, but increasingly as communities we're struggling to meet our sustainability goals. How will we meet those goals if we don't shift our focus increasingly to things like transit? So those questions that we all were talking about, interestingly, lead me to my next point, which is on Monday, Joe and I will be presenting our annual work session with City Council about the parking system. At that meeting, what we do is we present information about the system. Here's data on the revenues, here's information about users. We are going to talk with them, though, also about some questions that I think we have to solve together. Because the questions we have are questions of policy. In examples, we got our parking study last year, and what that study showed us is our facilities and our meters are at capacity, and yet there's more demand coming. So an example of a question that we need to wrestle together is our zoning has had downtown parking exempt for decades, except if we invoke the use of premiums, and now we're requiring them to provide parking. So some of the locations in downtown, you have to wonder, why are we requiring parking? Because there's transit nearby, they're highly pedestrian, we can provide for bicycles. Why do we have requirements for parking that then land on the public parking system to provide? Another question has to do with how can we better manage parking in the evening? A question that I think we all should wrestle with, one of the stats that SEMCOG has given us is the number of people over the age of 65 will double in the next 15 years. Well, how do we provide more access at the curb is an important question for accessibility. So how do we manage at night? Right now we're not really managing, and that's a question we need to talk about. Another one that we need to talk about are recommendations in the study having to do with tiering our parking rates more, to give more people more choices, shifting hours of enforcement, finding our way with fines toward escalating fines for repeat people who get tickets regularly, but also a first-time forgiveness for tickets, because nobody likes to get that first ticket. And another question about eliminating time limits at the meters. These are really important policy questions, and we're going to tee them up and ask our council and our community to help us weigh in on these. So tune in if you are available on Monday. It will be part of the council work session evening. And then 2 items of business just to bring to your attention. The first is a reminder, we have a retreat on November 15th that afternoon, and so just be sure to block out that time. We're going to be working on an agenda and getting back to you soon with content. Effectively, what we want to wrestle with are policy questions and project questions. And so as we are able to figure out a better way to frame that and how we're going to get there, we'll be getting you content. And then the last item is at your seat and also up on our website is our annual State of the Downtown report. This is a wonderful opportunity to collect a lot of information about downtown. We commission a market scan, which gives us data on things like residential trends, commercial activities. But this report encapsulates not only that, but also other data about the downtown and about the impact of DDA projects. I want to thank Al and Joan. They took some time to give us some feedback on it and think about kind of how we lay out this report. But I welcome anybody who has content they'd like us to add to next year's report, or if we find a typo in this version, we'd like to be sure we capture it. That's the beauty of online hosting of a report, because you can keep making changes. But it's a great opportunity to celebrate some of the attributes of downtown, for instance, the extraordinary special events, the diversity of our residents, just the sheer number of uses downtown, including grocery stores, churches, shoe repairs. This is our chance to celebrate all of those aspects. So any feedback you have for us on this report, we welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you. Approval of minutes from the September meeting, pages 3 through 12. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And support.
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes from September?
Aye.
Motion passes. Subcommittee report. That was my first one, so I was excited about it. I had the process written down. Everyone said they did.
Oh, okay.
I counted.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't say anything because I wasn't there.
You didn't say anything? Those who disapproved.
I didn't disapprove. I just
Abstentions.
Exactly, because I wasn't there, so how could I know?
All right, so you abstained on this vote.
Okay.
I wasn't there and I moved.
Messed up. Now I have to have a big celebration for my second motion because then this one's got all fluff. Subcommittee reports. Partnerships and Economic Development Committee. Joan Lundstein.
I'll defer to
I'm
you
not
if
doing
you'd like
it,
to.
no.
Okay, you're not going to do it. Okay.
I got too much
You
to
have
do.
too much on your plate. So our committee met with our partners, including Planning Commission, and I believe we also had a city council member there. We reviewed the downtown market scan commissioned by the DDA from Forward Planning. This report provides a series of downtown data such as residential growth predictions, commercial rental rates. All of that's used in our State of the Downtown report, so that was previously referred to, and that information is in there. This is a third report that we have gotten from Forward Planning, which previously provided similar data in 2012 and 2014, and our partners who were there certainly appreciated having access to all of that data, and that's one of the things that, as the DDA, that we pride ourselves in doing, is providing a lot of information to our various partners. So our next meeting is scheduled for the 12th. However, that is the Yom Kippur holiday, and so we need to reschedule. So I guess we decided to just cancel it and wait and have a meeting in November. So our meeting in November then will be just our internal partnership. It won't be with the other partners. Okay, so I guess we just need to make sure that the external partners are aware of that. But we'll do that. I don't know if anybody has any questions. That's it.
Capital Improvements Committee. John Moore.
Thank you. I'm going to take this in chronological sequence. So on your agenda, it shows 5th and Detroit first, but I'm going to start with Southview since that's the first project going. Things are moving along. There are no significant issues that have come up so far, so it puts us in a position to be ready to put that project out to bid in late October or early November. Hoping that that timing will allow us to get good bids and schedules, and it's well ahead of where we need to be in the construction schedule. It's probably a good time for us all to remind ourselves of that project. So you'll see at your table handout, large letters, Capital Improvements Committee report. And you know, as this project starts to move forward and the public starts to become more aware of what's going to happen, this is a good way to brush up on the goals of the project and what we're doing. What I would emphasize, you'll see there are 3 columns. What we heard, and that was the outreach out to the public and to the various folks about what's needed there. The second column is best practices, and the third is design response. I'm going to focus on the first and the third column, what we heard and what we're designing. So the first of what we heard, bump outs, too cluttered and restrictive. So those are those areas where folks are, you know, there's everything from trees to lampposts to, bike racks to all kinds of things. So the response to that is removing some of the raised planters that are there now, trying to kind of simplify how those bump outs work and the number of trees along the way there. The second thing, you need to match the current tree quantity, but doing it in a different way. There's other vegetation being put in some areas, and you'll see it in the graphic form later, with low plant beds and that sort of thing. We heard not enough space for outdoor dining and block areas, so by getting rid of the big planters, it gives us the opportunity to have more space available. The sidewalks will be increased a wee bit in width to 14.5 feet. We heard that light levels are inconsistent, so lighting is being reworked, including moving to LED lighting, which obviously is more efficient and so forth. We got sort of the mixed response about seating. Those of you who come to those meetings, you know that some folks like the idea of providing more on-street seating for folks, and other people don't like it so much. So we made some compromises and sort of did some design changes to sort of meet a spot maybe in the middle that will equally to satisfy everyone. You may remember that from a pedestrian point of view, the crossings at both Forest and Washington are challenging because they're very wide. They're, when the lights are changing, you need to get across a lot of pavement to get across. So those are 2 areas of emphasis of increasing what we call bump outs, but that area, those pedestrian areas, to allow those crosswalks to be shortened and therefore safer. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more when we're looking at the Carytown project as we move forward. One of the big pieces of input is keeping it simple. And so I think the ultimate design of this is really, it's elegant, but it's straightforward, and it should last for a long time. There were, concerns about the last version of this that was a bit trendy, if you will. So our hope is that the use of materials and the basic design is pretty timeless and makes sense. The other thing that, looking from a best practices point of view, is trying to do what we can to deal with stormwater and using the opportunity of those landscaped areas to deal with stormwater. So those are some of the things, just if you talk to people bring it up with you. Those are some of the things that we got feedback from the community on, and the way we're trying to address those concerns and that feedback. And for those of you like me who think better graphically than in words, there's some pretty pictures attached to this that will, kind of gives you a pretty good feel of what that whole stretch will feel like in terms of how the landscaping's handled, and the walkways and paving and those sorts of things. And including, and I guess to me this is an important thing, is understanding the way parking lanes and travel lanes work. I think it's something that we're all becoming more attuned with each of these projects that comes along, is that relationship between how do you use that right-of-way space? How much is sidewalk? How much is parking width? How much is bicycle lane? How much is a travel lane? how that affects all those, you know, pedestrians, bikes, and vehicles. So that, I think, in a nutshell, gives you a picture for Southview. Is there any concern? Are there any concerns, questions about Southview? Amber, I'm sure, would be more than happy to.
Can you remind us the timetable and when it's likely to be under construction?
Here's your opportunity.
So we should be putting it out to bid no later than November. And then we hope to be under construction as soon as U of M wraps in the spring of next year. And then basically take up the whole construction season of next year, but take a break for art fair and have it cleaned up and usable for art fair.
And you may remember too, that the plan is to be one lane at a time.
One side of the
One
street
side
at
of
a
the
time.
Street at a time.
And remind me too about what we decided to do, since there are some new projects that are proposed for that area. How are we going to do the timing?
One of the projects that's proposed, they think that they will be out of the right of way by the time our project starts. So we will just complete the portion in front of their building. Another project thinks that they will start while we are underway. So we will leave that section and we won't touch it, and then they will implement it.
According to our plans.
According to
so
our
it'll be
plans.
Conforming. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks for this. This was very helpful.
Good, good. You know, and I'd encourage all of us to do everything we can to sort of outreach the community about things like this that are going to be changes. You know, anyone you've got an opportunity to talk to is going to be on Southview. You know, give them a heads up. You know, tell them what's happening. You know, help people understand it. You know, I think oftentimes, you know, we probably could do a better job of making sure the word gets out. It's just so hard. How, you know, trying to communicate with everybody, not to be surprised, and especially students and folks associated with the university. So, you know, any opportunities we have to kind of give people a heads up. People are always, change is hard. Change is hard for people, and everything we can do to try to get it out there that and people can anticipate can kind of prepare them for what's going to happen. Not just the construction, the end result. So hopefully the end result will justify the construction challenges. So if no one has any other questions, I'll move on to 5th and Detroit. I think, you know, folks are well aware that a lot of the concern and emphasis for that project has been to look at issues of pedestrian and bicycle safety and the way folks move through that area. You know, just as a reference point for folks, on a given market Saturday, as many as 900 people cross 5th. It's a lot of people, you know. So it kind of gives you an idea. I'd be curious how many cars cross, you know. And the other challenge, as many of you know, is not only do a lot of people cross every which way, all over the place. And so that's a tremendous challenge. And ironically enough, you know, one of the reasons for doing this project is to repair the brick, because it does this, but in a sense that probably helps slow traffic down and make it a little bit safer. You know, so that's a big point of emphasis of the project, is how to, you know, improve the appearance and have it function hopefully much better than it does now. So sort of in that regard, we've talked about all the same sorts of things I just talked about at Southview. Bump outs, reducing the distances for crossing, what are called tabletops are on the table as a possibility to help slow traffic down and deal with some funneling pedestrians into a certain spot, those sorts of things. You know, as we all know, that, you know, we seem to have more and more pedestrians on the sidewalks and bicycles on the streets, and that conflicts oftentimes with cars and how to deal with cars. So staff, and I'd say DDA staff and city staff, I think have come up with a brilliant idea. As you know, there's the traffic studies and there are traffic engineers, and they can do all kinds of things to imagine what might happen if you do X, Y, or Z. But it's, what we're going to do is we're going to move forward with a pilot and reduce the lane between, where am I? Kingsley and Catherine.
Yeah.
And put up temporary barriers for about 4 weeks, starting in mid-October.
On which side of the street?
It would basically maintain the lane, easterly lane of Fifth.
Okay.
But just so folks understand, the barriers would be placed such that you can still, the curb cuts will be available. You know, it will still function from both a vehicular point of view and a pedestrian point of view the way it does now. This exercise is largely to do with looking at cars, and the biggest thing is whether or not cars would back all the way back up to Beeks. Is the single biggest thing, just to sort of nail down. All the projections and the studies say that it won't and that it should work if we want to consider it. And I want to emphasize, this is not a done deal by any means. This is simply a test. You know, the emergency warning broadcast system. It's just an experiment, just to see whether in the real world it supports what the traffic engineers and folks are thinking is possible. Again, the goal is to do things that would help promote pedestrian safety, potentially provide the opportunity for bicycle lanes, those sorts of other things that we're still testing. We're in the very early stages. This is still sort of pre-design stage. This is data gathering, you know, I put it that way. So, you know, it'll be very interesting. You know, we'll see how this goes. I asked Amber the question of whether folks think this time of year is a good snapshot, a 4-week period now, and the answer makes sense that, you know, obviously students are back, community high is up and running, there are football Saturdays, city wanted to do it before snow, which makes sense for snow removal and all that. So this seems like as good an opportunity, a kind of a peak load period, if you will, as there will be, and we'll test it, see what happens, and I really want to hand it to folks both here and at the city for being willing to just try something. You know, it makes a lot of sense, and you know, maybe hopefully it'll work, but maybe it won't, and we'll learn something.
I wanted to emphasize one of the other things that we talked about at that point. The traffic engineers talked about their grading system for how well traffic moves through areas, and it's A, B, C, D, E, and they don't have the F in there because the point is it's not quite like, you know, oh, I got an A on my math test. It really is just a way of grading the flow, and one of the points being is that A isn't necessarily the best. A is what you want if you're on 94, but if you're in an area that's highly pedestrian and bicycle centric, then you probably don't want an A for your for the cars, because it's going to endanger pedestrians and bicyclists. So that's one of the things about moving to a potential one lane, is that indeed it would degrade that the flow through to a certain extent. And the question is, does it do it in an acceptable amount? And you know, we see that certainly out in Jackson, what happened there. Everyone was like, oh, this is going to be horrible, and actually it turns out it makes it safer. And because of the fact that they widened out where Jackson and Maple meet, there's actually a place for all that traffic to go, and that's part of the plan on this as well. So I thought that was an interesting point, that it actually involves a deliberate inconveniencing to a certain extent. It only brings it down, by their projections, 1 grade from what it is now, but at least by their projections. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it was emphasized, but the whole point of that being to make things more pedestrian and bicycle friendly. In fact, it might allow for a bicycle lane, which is protected entirely from the street with parking between.
Yep, those are excellent points. In terms of this pilot test, too, they've done a good job. They've actually, you know, diagrammed out where all the, you know, temporary structures would go and how it's going to be worked out, and it seems to be worked out quite nicely. The other question I'd asked was, okay, once we do it, what does it mean? How do we evaluate what it means? And so there are a series of things that get tested, queuing and turning movements, and there's going to be video done of it and things like that. So it will give us some, valuable data that will really tell the story, including, the speed of vehicles and give us some idea for pedestrian crossings of what's happening. So, that's sort of in the works. Obviously, once that data is collected, it'll be up to various folks to interpret what it means, and what to take from it. So that's sort of our next major step that I think will be interesting, and I would expect that we'd get a preliminary report back at our next meeting, October 26th. Hopefully get a feel for how things are going in that first week or so. Any questions about Fifth and Detroit, or anything that I missed, Amber, that I should be bringing up? Okay. Any questions, concerns? What do you think about this piloting notion?
We previous life we did a lot of those kind of things to try new ideas out, and it's certainly a cost-effective way, to experiment as long as you can do it safely. So I think it's a good idea to do it. I think it's a good way to think about reimagining our streets and what they exist for besides passing cars through areas. So I'm glad the city staff was open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. I think it's an indicator of things to come citywide.
Yeah.
But I think the whole concept of new urbanism and getting places for people instead of just moving and parking cars is something that will improve our quality of life, and I'm glad that we are trying things before we committed to a permanent hardscape.
All right, let's move on here on. Oh, I'm sorry, one last thing there. There's going to be another series of public outreach in November. Is that correct? Have we scheduled anything yet? Okay, so it's coming up. Folks, for public outreach, I'm pointing at you because of Carytown. Let folks know that that's going to be coming up in November. Last thing, Huron Street. Staff's begun working with MDOT to set up how to do traffic study. So again, we'll be into some interesting things with Huron Street. I want to remind everyone that we're going to do a walk around Huron Street on October 24th. So if you can kind of put that up. Do we have it at 11 o'clock? Is that 11:30? 11:30, thank you. And that's kind of where we are with Huron Street.
Is there, I know obviously we have to talk with MDOT. I guess the other thing that I'm curious about is how this does or does not intersect with the connector.
That's a fascinating question, and it's been on my mind. And I think first we need to sort of, before we jump to that, maybe collect some more information about the existing conditions and all that. But I think it certainly is something that I'm interested in understanding better. Yeah. It's something we've talked about with staff and something to think about. Because obviously at this point, right now, that leg of the connector is planned for either Washington or Liberty, I believe. But I think most of us can imagine huge challenges with either of those streets potentially. And I think Huron is pretty fascinating as a possible consideration.
Right. And obviously, it has huge difficulties as an MDOT street, but MDOT 2 is evolving.
Well, and needless to say, connectors got huge difficulties too, so maybe they're a match made in heaven.
And exactly, and it just seems to me that it's an opportunity to actually enhance the pedestrian experience on Huron, whereas my fear on Washington is it destroys what you've carefully built.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Interesting piece. Any other questions, concerns about Huron? Obviously, we're just starting, so if you can make it, it'd be great. You know, there's nothing like, I've really enjoyed going on these sort of walkabouts for these first couple of projects. I think it helps all of us see more things and get a chance to talk to each other about what you're seeing. See if what you're seeing makes sense. So, as far as moving forward, so that walkabout is October 24th at 11:30, and then our regular meeting October 26th at 9 a.m.
If I could, you know, one of the things to consider as we look at design is that streets take on different characteristics at different times of the day. And rather than always designing just for the peak hours to move as much traffic, we need to look at some flexibility in how we look at the streets. There may be times during the day where certain streets we may want to close to traffic. We may want to do things that limit hours of where deliveries are made. We may want to look at things that allow for parking in travel lanes, what are currently travel lanes during times where the demand isn't as great. So again, as we look at how to optimize the use of the real estate in the right of way, we've got to break the traditional way of looking at things, and you know, most state departments of transportation are basically highway departments. We need to consider ourselves fortunate if we can get MDOT to be more progressive in what they look at, but designing flexibility into space and allowing different uses to dominate at different times of the day will also have a great impact on quality of life, and also not doing anything that preclude future uses like the connector. Too often, you know, we've seen cases where we put an obstacle in that makes future uses impossible. So as we go through the imagining of those areas, keep in mind that the character of streets varies during time of day and day of week, and we need to be open to flexibility in our uses.
I think those are great
And
points.
time of year.
And time.
Yeah, and I'd even maybe take it a step further in that notion of flexibility and moving forward is when we're making these large infrastructure investments, we really need to think 20 years from now what's going to be happening, and a lot of that you can't project, you can't know. So you've got to create a certain amount of flexibility, but also do a certain amount of visioning of what can happen, what's possible, and where are we headed towards. And my hope would be that maybe associated with our retreat will be part of that part of the conversation. All right. Any other concerns, questions? Good. Thanks.
Finance Committee, Marie?
Two issues today. One, if you guys look on page 13, it's a kind of a snapshot of the parking. All of the parking is a holistic approach of all of the parking facilities that we have downtown. It's a mini P&L, if you will. It doesn't include, so this is just revenue from parking and the direct expenses associated with it. Things that aren't in here are labor to manage it, any capital projects that are going on from a maintenance standpoint. That's not in here. This is just a snapshot of revenue and direct expenses, and it's just a way to look at it to try to understand how the whole thing works together. Some make money, some don't, some have bonds attached to them that are being paid off, some don't. And so if you look at, you know, the total income all the way to the right, and, you know, there are two sources of revenue for the DDA. Parking is one of them. So this number will play into the retreat we're going to have when we talk about what kind of things we want to tackle and what kind of monies are available to do it. Does anybody have any questions about it?
Is there a budgeted number against this? You show at the on the total, you show net income per space of $605. How's that compare to what the projection for the year was?
We can get that to you.
That'd be nice to show that, just so we know how we're doing.
So this will be part of the retreat. This will weigh into the discussion that we have in November 15th. The second issue that we have is it's pretty much just a housekeeping issue in that the Bank of Ann Arbor has requested that we pass a formal resolution outline. I want to move to a resolution.
Do I see
Forward.
It's a resolution to authorize signers on the DDA bank accounts. It's housekeeping.
So they wanted us to pass a formal resolution outlining the roles and responsibilities of the DDA Executive Committee and staff in regards to the DDA investment accounts. As it stands right now, there aren't enough signers on the account if there was any kind of a catastrophic event. So it's simply to add signers onto the account. So the committee recommends approval of the resolution. And if anybody has any questions.
Wasn't there something where, in the past, where over a certain amount, 2 people had to sign?
That would be on a checking account.
Oh.
Checks over $25,000
Yeah.
require 2 signatures.
These are the investment accounts. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay, sorry, didn't catch that.
Anybody have any
Discussion.
questions?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passed.
Well, see,
There we go, there's the first.
ask a
That's,
question, sort of back to this one.
Yeah, sure.
So you said we'll be having some conversations at the retreat. Could you be sure that we know when the terms on the bond payments come up?
Yeah,
for each
that's
of
part
these?
of
I
the
mean,
10-year
that's,
plan, yeah.
you know, I'd like to see that, in more of our documents, it would be helpful to see that, because it's a good placeholder as we're trying to think of timing for projects and so forth. You know, so any opportunities to, just throw a year in there.
Absolutely, we'll do sure.
When things are expiring, it would just help keep it in our heads. And maybe a related question is, and I think I've asked this before, and Joe's probably heard me ask this before, and I keep forgetting the answer to it, is are we able, if we wanted to restructure our bond? So is it the way it works through the city? I know there's city bonds. I don't know enough about how that works.
Depending on the terms of the bond and how new they are, most bonds have a period after you've taken it out that you cannot call it. We have a professional management firm, Stoddard and Barch, who watches that and lets us know when it's advantageous due to interest rates to refinance bonds. And,
Okay.
do that.
Do you happen to know if any of these are possibly candidates?
I'm sure that-
Is it something sort of on the?
I'm sure that many of them, especially the ones in their twilight, that will be running out in the next 5 years or so, are eligible for prepayment.
So is that something though we just wait until Stoddard Barge tells us, or do you pretty regularly contact them and poke them?
They've been very good, and they have refinanced
Okay.
bonds on their own when the savings were there.
Okay.
But you know,
Right.
I think it's more of a board decision of whether you want to use available cash now
Right.
to pay off a bond.
Okay.
So-
Terrific. Thanks, Joe.
When's your next meeting, Green?
Our next meeting is Tuesday, October 25th at 1 p.m.
Lovely. Operations Committee.
And gadzooks, I have to do the John Split stuff, don't I?
Do your best, Johnson.
All right. So, which I haven't really looked over to see what he's supposed to be saying, though I was at the meeting.
He never
monthly
says much, so I
parking-
don't think you have too much pressure.
Excellent. So let's see, we have a monthly parking and transportation report on pages 16 through 18. Let's see, so the usual thing goes over the special events. Is there anything to point out? Kristen William, maintenance is, fall washdowns are going on, but the 2016 maintenance and repairs are, as of this writing, nearly complete. Is that still true, Jada? Yep, okay. Parking equipment, right, we of course had approved buying more of the multi-space parking meters, and so those have been ordered, and I believe installation is going to be happening in the next couple of months.
November, yeah.
November, yeah. Let's see. What else is on here? The 4th and William Improvements Project. Did steel indeed get delivered as planned, and was it the right steel?
Yes, so
Yay.
we are done with the demolition of the old elevator tower, and we are now underway with steel erection for the second of the 2 high-speed elevators. So it is on site and it's being installed as we speak.
Let's see, other things in this report to note. We have information about Get Downtown, who they're reaching out to, but most importantly is that Get Downtown renewals are underway. November 1st, there's a new the Go Pass rather. So November 1st will be the new Go Passes. This is talked about the ridership on we've talked about that a bunch in the last couple of months. There's certainly been more efficient use of them, both by working more directly with the companies, making sure each company has a coordinator, so that as people leave, the Go Passes are deactivated. So there's better use of the system as originally intended. Yes.
This may be a question mainly for Joe. I've got a question about the First in Washington condominium. So, as I'm reading this, I see that it's in the process of establishing a condominium association. I'm surprised. How are they functioning without having one now?
Basically, we're cooperating at this point in time and getting the common elements done. There are not that many common elements in the facility.
Right.
It was set up to be very few in the beginning, and cooperation between the 2 parties is happening to make sure that the sidewalks are clear of snow and that the systems are being regularly evaluated.
The reason I'm asking is usually condo association documents also include decision-making processes and how percentage of ownership of common elements and all those sorts of things that I would have anticipated would have had to be in place legally already.
Correct.
So I'm confused.
The documentation is there, they've just never formed the condominium association, which is between the city and Arbor City Apartments or the owner thereof.
Huh.
The DDA is not a part owner and therefore is not a party to the condominium association. We're just having a management contract through the city to manage their asset in the parking element.
Okay. And I guess I'm not an attorney. It doesn't make perfect sense to me, but
So basically, it's the city attorney and the owner of the building, owner of the apartments, getting together to form. Right now, they're applying for a tax ID number. Once they have that, I think they can file paperwork with the appropriate state agencies to then get a condominium association. Then they elect officers.
okay. So the developers maintain ownership then? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Joe, maybe, could I ask, do you happen to know? I mean, do you
Outside my
understand?
area of expertise.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll talk to you later. I just want to understand
Okay.
better.
There are things there.
It's different
such
than
as-
my experience would
Okay.
indicate. So,
All
okay.
right.
Thank you.
Let's see. We do, moving on, more parking than that operations. There is, in our hands, I believe, a parking request from Core Spaces. They're the folks who are working on the Library Lane development. In general, the committee was supportive of the request, but no action is going to happen until the council approves the Core Spaces proposal. At that point, then it makes sense for us to look at that in detail. The other parking request is the Southview developer parking request using the parking in lieu process. And that's for what is known as North, what is the name of the development? What is it? North Collegian? Yes. And apparently there's planning for what would ultimately be the South Collegian. to have parking available there for both the north and south, but until that's built, they need a parking in lieu. So that's going to get discussed further as it moves on. And this, of course, all ties in with some of the very discussions that our executive director talked about at the beginning, which is how that we'll have to be dealing with a lot in the years ahead about zoning that requires a certain amount of parking, but maybe that doesn't really even make sense for a particular development. Fourth and William construction we took care of, so I think I've done my John Split stuff. Did I miss anything?
No.
Nope.
You do the key stuff.
Now I can. Right, transportation, and there's a lot of transit stuff going on. That's first on the agenda. The resolution of support for regional transit, which is on page 19. This is referring to the RTA, Regional Transit Authority. I think everyone has a future transit taking their place. I'm sure most people are aware of it, but the RTA was approved at the state level in 2012 and has moved along incredibly quickly. Southeast Michigan is essentially the only large regional area in the United States without a transit plan. So this will address that. I saw a fascinating little thing in this paper on the page before the end showing transit spending per person in all of the regional areas, and you can see the incredibly tiny amount that we're currently spending in Southeast Michigan. So our hope is that this passes. It would about double the amount that's being spent in Southeast Michigan and would achieve a lot of things. It would, of course, in Ann Arbor, one of the things that we would see is commuter transit, rail transit between Ann Arbor and Detroit. A lot of robust additions, bus rapid transit lines, at least 4 of them, maybe it's 5, that would connect a lot of the counties to downtown Detroit, and a lot of connecting spaces between counties as well. It does a lot for ADA compliance in areas which right now are not served or underserved. That's one of the areas that Western Washington will benefit from. And though this, of course, is not about downtown Ann Arbor specifically, I think we all recognize that that regional transit is vital to the economic health of the entire area, including downtown Ann Arbor. So as a result, we're looking for support from the DDA, saying we support the plan. This is similar measures have already been passed by the city and the county. Those locally are the ones I know about.
The AAA board.
Right. And we have a proposal in front of Watts that will be going in their next, the Washington Area Transportation Study, that will be going in front of our next policy board meeting. I never moved this, did I? It's even in red. I'd like to move this resolution. Support. There we go.
Second.
Any questions? Yeah.
So I wasn't at this last operations meeting, so
Uh-huh.
I assume this was discussed
Yeah.
and the committee
Right.
supports and.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
Other discussion?
I won't repeat what Keith said in terms of what this, in my mind, means for transportation, but I think even over and above that, what it means as a commitment for these communities, if we can get it passed, to cooperate and look a little more about what we do as a region. And in my mind, I know that's, some people say that's giving something up, but I really think Washington County and the city of Ann Arbor have a lot to gain from this. we're a destination for people, for entertainment, but more importantly for employment. And I think this is a great first step towards that regional approach to what we do.
Yeah, it is kind of fascinating that we're a commuter out and a commuter in the city.
Yeah.
It's probably relatively unusual, I would imagine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
And, thank you. And then the only other thing I had, look at the agenda to make sure I'm not lying there. Yes, is, we talked some when we did our last budget about two transportation studies. One was the connector study and the other was a circulator study. Committee talked a bit about this. It's not something we need a resolution for because it's already in the budget. But we wanted to have some discussion about it before moving forward, make sure everyone is comfortable with it and doesn't have any other issues. Basically, we had put about $25,000 aside for it, and it would be to put out an RFP to study the creation of a downtown circulator. What would success look like? How do circulators work in other cities, and what are the cost estimates? So I guess I'm just opening this up in case anyone has any concerns before we move forward with putting out that RFQ. Yes?
So, as part of that, will there be any sort of parameters on what it's trying to accomplish, or for what
That's what
population,
that
or what
first
geographic
question.
area?
That's what that first question is. What does success look like? It's really asking, who is it serving, and what is a successful outcome?
So, but I'm trying to understand, is that what the study will tell us, or
Yes.
are we going to try to formulate some things of what we're trying to accomplish that'll be in the RFP?
No, I think that's what the study is looking to and put an answer.
Okay.
So $25,000 is not a lot of money for professional service, so I guess what I just heard is that we're gonna get someone to help us kind of corral us all together and figure out what it is that we want to do with some sort of connector and then provide a path forward.
Right, exactly. We used to have one here, and when it was working optimally, it was something everyone loved. So I think it's an excellent opportunity to look and see if it's something we can replicate and if it's something we can afford.
What happened to it?
What a good question. It was originally funded by a couple of grants that ran out, and the decision by the AA, at the time just two A's, ATA, was to fund it through the university by providing additional services to them. So it stopped becoming a circulator and started becoming, as much as anything else, a commuter bus for some outlying dorms. And as soon as that happened, when the regularity of the route went way down, it was like every 20 minutes or 20 minutes plus. And the idea of a circulator is you don't look at the schedule, you just walk out there and jump on the bus when it comes around. And it felt when you were on it less like a circulator than by, it went so far out. If you were on the wrong part of the circle, it would take you 3 times longer on the bus than it would if you had walked it in the first place.
This was the purple buses that was known as the Link.
Yep, the Link. Whereas before that happened, at one point it was like doing a 7-minute loop, and it was immensely popular. ridership was way above what projections had been. It was sort of a shame to go from a success to something that was stopped. We had an opportunity to look at doing something similar.
When is your next meeting?
Our next meeting is October 26th at 11 a.m.
Executive committee. We don't have anything. Our next meeting, Wednesday, November 2nd at 11 a.m. Which is before our next board meeting. New business. Anyone? Any new business? Other audience participation? Anyone? Seeing and hearing none. Motion for adjournment. All in favor of adjournment? Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.